Well, it is nice to be back at Fairfield. Last weekend, we were in San Antonio watching our son graduate from college. Joanne had come down 4 days early to babysit our grandson Miles so Sam and Kelsey could pack for their move to Fort Campbell, where Sam will be completing his. I stayed back here to help with Madeline and watch the dog. Flew down Thursday morning on Southwest Airlines via Houston. Because I'm a simple Quaker, I didn't pay extra to first. One of the last one on the in a middle seat in between two people who were as different as night and day. The man in the aisle seat moaned and groaned the entire way. He was unaware that Southwest doesn't serve meals on domestic flights, and in anticipation of a meal, hadn't eaten breakfast. The poor, long-suffering flight attendant kept giving him packets of pretzels, which did not improve his mood. The more she did for him, the more he complained. Pretzels, he demanded. No thank yous, no words of appreciation, just and groaning all the way from Indianapolis to Houston. And after a while, the flight attendant just... The lady in the window seat was the exact opposite. I think she might have been a Quaker, but then I tend to think everyone I admire must be a Quaker. She just gave off that vibe. She was gracious and generous. She had brought some snacks on the plane and shared them with the aisle seat man, and he said not a word of thanks. He just acted as if it were his due. Of course she should give him her snacks. I wrote her, and so we chatted. She was going to see her grandchildren, and I kept thinking how fortunate her grandchildren were to have a grandma like that. I hope they realize that. I think they do. I know Miles and Madeline are aware they hit the grandma jackpot. So we were talking about our grandkids. And then she asked me what I did. And I love it when I'm on an airplane, chatting with someone who doesn't know me and will never see me again. It gives me the opportunity to reinvent myself. I don't have to be a writer or a pastor. I can be anything I want to be. An architect, I love that one. A brain surgeon, a rocket scientist. But this lady was so nice, I didn't want to lie to her. That guy in the aisle seat, I would have told whoppers to him all day long. But I didn't want to lie to the window seat lady because she was so nice. Now, I've always liked farmers. It's hard not to like a farmer. It's such a noble profession, feeding people, tending the earth, hardworking. So I told her I owned a farm, which is true. And if by that she assumed I was a farmer, well, then how could I help that? Plus, it was only a 2-hour flight, so I thought I knew enough about farming to sustain the charade for 2 hours. She said, "A farmer? That's wonderful. My husband and I are farmers." Which was the last thing I wanted to hear, since I know nothing about farming. She said, "What do you grow?" What do I grow? What do I grow? What do I grow? I immediately started thinking of everything you see in the produce aisle at Kroger's. And I told her mostly bananas and coconuts, sometimes pineapples. I think she figured out pretty quickly that I didn't make my living as a farmer, but even then she was so gracious. She said, coconuts. I said, yeah, the money in coconuts is in making the little coconut heads that you can sell. I have one here that you can sell to tourist shops in Florida. There's lots of money in that from Midwest farmers who grow coconuts. I said, you ought to look into it when you get home, talk with your husband, and if you want, I'll send you some coconut seeds so you can do this. But there I was on the airplane, seated between ingratitude and gratitude, which is often where I find myself these days. One moment ungrateful and moaning and groaning, the next moment grateful and generous and sharing. Now, I'm doing my best to lean toward gratitude, but it is a challenge, isn't it? It is a challenge. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant, we're going from coconuts to Kant, that's a pretty good leap, said this about ingratitude. Ingratitude, he said, is the essence of vileness. Ingratitude is the essence of vileness. Kant believed that the failure to be grateful for the benefits and blessings we receive discourages people from doing good in the future. I noticed that with the flight attendant. The more ungrateful the aisle seat man was, the less enthusiastic she seemed to be about helping him. And I certainly don't blame her. Who wants to do something nice for someone who is ungrateful and arrogant? Not me. I'll just keep them from me. We know that's true, and we know we're inclined to do that because when we have done something kind to someone and they respond with ingratitude, we are not as likely to help them again. Thus, ingratitude is the essence of vileness. Kant believed that ingratitude was a failure to fulfill our moral duty because it shows disrespect for the person who has done a good deed. If ingratitude becomes common, it discourages people from committing acts of kindness, ultimately harming society. So here's what I've been thinking about this week. Amid our current struggles, I've been thinking all along that our divide was a political divide. The Republicans pitted against the Democrats, which is wonderfully convenient, since it puts people like me on the good side. But it is a false distinction because it implies Republicans are all bad and Democrats are all good, which simply is not true. It is, though, tidy and therefore tempting, but it isn't true. Our divide, what really separates us, is between those who are ungrateful and those who are grateful. Ungrateful people in my experience, not just with others, but with myself, that when I am ungrateful or when I see that quality in others, I notice they tend to be narcissistic, thinking only of themselves and what they deserve, thinking only of what life owes them, and when they don't get what they believe is their due, they look for someone to blame, someone who is getting what is rightfully theirs, whether it is attention or resources or admiration. When we are ungrateful, and I say we because we are all susceptible to ingratitude, when we are ungrateful, we become acutely sensitive to perceived indignities and slights. So look for someone to blame. It's a vicious circle because the more ungrateful we are, the less likely others are to extend kindness to us. So our anger and self-absorption grow and build. But when we're grateful, when we acknowledge the blessings and benefits we receive, we further the moral contract by which we all benefit. If ingratitude is the essence of all vileness, gratitude is the heart of all goodness, for it encourages others to continue their acts of charity and generosity. So be grateful, friends, be grateful. Look for every opportunity in your life to say thank you, to say I appreciate you. When we do that, we all become farmers, reaping a harvest of benevolence and well-being.